Hey guys, it's time to Nefas and chill. Hopefully you are staying safe and healthy wherever you may be. In this build video, I'll be going over the Greymoor iteration of the Thunderstruck Sorcerer PvE tank we created last patch during Storm. Unfortunately, we had to do a massive update to this build, primarily due to the nerf to the monster set Grundwolf, which was used by the Storm version. Pretty frustrating, but we'll manage. The focus of the build remains the same. High sustain without needing to always rely on Dark Deal if you don't want to use it, and of course the capability to do all 4-man content including Dragonstar Arena and Black Rose Prison. If you guys have been enjoying my build videos and want to be kept up to date on them every patch, definitely subscribe to the channel. I will always appreciate you doing so. And don't forget to check out the updates to the Necromancer, Dragon Knight, Nightblade, and Werewolf tank builds for the Greymoor patch. We'll be updating our Warden and Templar tank builds next, and we'll even have a Vampire tank build ready for this patch as well. The Greymoor update to the Thunderstruck build brings not just more sustain than the last iteration, but slightly more survivability and forgiveness should you mess up, especially if you're a new player or a new tank in the Elder Scrolls Online. While you could tank on any race with this build, I do recommend Nord, Argonian, Imperial, and Breton. In the Storm video, I showcased it using a Breton to show that it can work on any race, and in this Greymoor iteration, I will still showcase it using a Breton. Please note that your attribute allocation will definitely vary depending on your race stats. So let's go over the stats, race, Mundus, and food before we get on to the rest of the video. In terms of the race, we are Breton as noted, and just to show you guys the racial passives of a Breton, we do get quite a bit of max magicka, and we also do get free spell resistance, which is just extra free mitigation. Plus, this effect is doubled if we do get burning, shield, or concussed on ourselves from dungeon mobs or bosses. So effectively, a lot of the times we're looking at about 4600 mitigation, which is quite a bit. Now, the 7% cost reduction is very noticeable, and the Sorc tank can definitely have quite a lot of magicka abilities, including the self-heal. So this is going to be very, very nice to have. For the character stats, we have 27 points to health, 37 into stamina. Now that we are Breton, and of course, like I mentioned before, it will vary if you're Nord or Imperial, we have to make up for the fact that our stamina pool needs to be higher, even by the value of 1, than the magicka pool. The reason why this is because when we synergize shards or orbs from other players, the primary resource return will go to the higher max stat out of the two. So let's say if we had 21,000 max magicka and 20.5k max stamina. When we synergize an orb or a shard, we're gonna get magicka back, not stamina. And for this build, it's preferred that you get stamina back, because we are using stamina as a tank quite a bit here for blocking, roll dodging, and so forth. Even pulling adds in with Silver Leash, which we'll go over later. The 35,000 max health is pretty comfortable tank with, and this is because the Sorc tank brings in a lot of mitigation choices, as I'll show you as well. That's why you have 27 points into health and 37 points into stamina. Otherwise, generally speaking, for taking 4-man content, 35,000 health is very comfortable, and everything else comes after that. For magicka recovery, we have unbuffed without a potion, 1500-ish magicka recovery. Once we pop a potion, we do get almost over 1800, or on the back bar, we do get 2000 as well. Health recovery is going to be slightly over 1000. This is actually abnormal for most tank builds, but we are using a food called Bewitched Sugar Skulls. So Bewitched Sugar Skulls is actually going to be probably the best in slot tri-stat food. You can use the regular purple tri-stat food. This is if you have the gold, and it won't make or break it. This is just to squeeze out as much extra stats as possible, as it does offer a bit more max health, a bit more max stamina, and a bit more max magicka, while giving us free health recovery. So that's roughly about 1200 or so health back every 2 seconds during combat, which can be nice, but again, not a huge deal. Stam recovery is going to be, of course, abysmal, but we'll get into that later as well. Spell damage, weapon damage, spell crit, weapon crit. This was a huge focal point of the Storm iteration of the Thunderstruck build, and we're going to be moving away from this. So disregard all this. because we're not using Grundwolf or a crit set like Yokeda or Leviathan. And resistances wise, this is unbuffed on the Sword and Board bar, but once we buff it up, we have a very comfortable range of resistances. We have 27,000 spell resistances and 25.8k physical resistance. This is more than enough to tank pretty much all content, even trials. You do not need to hit 33,000 physical or spell resistance, which is a cap. There are other mitigation factors in play here, like the Sword and Board passives, Bound Aegis, and so on and so forth. Like block mitigation itself is 50% damage reduction. We also have, of course, champion points. So again, no need to hit max resistances. The Mundus stone here we're going to use is the Atronach. The other alternative Mundus stone you can use is going to be the Lord. So you take your pick. Do you need more max health, or do you think you need a bit more magic recovery? And that's pretty much it. So it took quite a few dungeon runs and so forth to figure this out, but I'll show you guys the item sets first and explain the alternatives and potential other item sets you could use if you don't want to farm these, or can't farm these if you don't have access to the content. So the monster set, in terms of trait and enchantment, it's going to be infused on the head, chest, legs, sturdy on every other piece, just as a reference. In terms of enchantments, it's going to be max health enchants, and the monster set itself is going to be Mother Cyanate. And Mother Cyanate is actually a pretty interesting set. Not only does it give us more max magicka, but also while we're in combat, casting an ability with a cast time or channeling an ability grants you a damage shield that absorbs 5,000 damage for 6 seconds. If this is broken, you restore 822 magicka, and this can occur once every 6 seconds. So basically you can have a 5,000 damage shield that scales off of your resistances on cooldown, which is pretty impressive. And of course, depending on the fights, your damage shield will or not be broken, but if it does get broken, which is probably going to be the majority of the time, you're just going to get a free 822 magicka back for not using any magicka. And just to demonstrate something, you don't have to use Dark Deal to actually proc this set. As you can see, the end of Dark Deal, once we're in combat, the end of Dark Deal actually procs the set, but you don't need to do it. If you don't want to run Dark Deal, you can actually just medium weave, and by medium weave, all you have to do is basically hold your light attack for like a very brief moment and let go. Just like that. So it's a 6-second shield that'll come back after 6 seconds on demand. So this is a pretty impressive set. Once we get into, hey, if you want to use Dark Deal and you don't want to be punished by being interrupted or something, or if you aren't going to block immediately after Dark Deal, then this is there to potentially save you. The primary 5-piece set, which actually is still left over from the Hero Storm iteration of this build, is going to be Livewire. And Livewire is also a pretty interesting set as well, and actually pretty decent. Not only does it give us 8% healing taken and a more maximum health, but when we take damage, we have a 25% chance to overload our circuits, applying concussion to enemies within 8 meters of you and healing for 1,130 health for each enemy hit. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. This is a very, very powerful set because not only are you taking damage from the mobs, not only are you applying concussion to the mobs, but in conjunction with Blockade of Storms, and if you read the passes for Blockade of Storms sets concussed enemies off balance. For the Greymoor patch, off balance is more important than ever, because every Magicka DPS and every Stamina DPS will most likely have the Exploiter perk. Their damage done against off-balance enemies goes up by 10%. This is a very important perk in endgame and for most CP allocations for DPS setups. So you're boosting your group damage by quite a bit, and it is a guaranteed concuss. Basically, 25% chance in this game is pretty much guaranteed. And remember, this applies concussion to multiple enemies. So a trash pack of 10 or 12 adds coming towards you, once they can concuss, all of them can concuss, you just put a wall down and they're all off balance, just like that. And this of course applies to bosses. And the greatest thing about this is the healing done is per enemy hit. So in large dungeon trash packs, you're not gonna die. That's the funny part. And once you take into account that you have other heals and other mitigation, yeah, it's a very powerful set. So this has remained from the previous update. And it's pretty important that this stays for the Thunderstruck build. The secondary 5-piece set I want to talk about is going to be a trial set. It's from Kind's Ages. You don't need the perfected version of it. The perfected version only adds just 1 line of magic recovery, not going to make or break your build. So you can just do normal Kind's Ages in the new Greymoor veteran or normal veteran trial in Western Skyrim. So not a big deal if you don't have perfected. And not only does it give us magic recovery, it gives us minor ages. Well, it's not a significant mitigation buff. It is just there, so it's free. Why not? And it does give us even more healing done. And the 5-piece bonus is casting an ability or drinking a potion that applies a major buff on yourself or an ally, creates a pool of Kind's Blessing for 4 seconds. You and allies standing in Kind's Blessing restores 399 stamina and magicka every 1 second. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. This is significantly more sustained than Grundwolf, which we were running last patch on the Thunderstruck build. This is a lot more sustained. And with the nerf to Grundwolf, whenever you deal crit damage, restore 700 magicka or stamina, whichever maximum is higher. You also gain 350 of the other resources. And remember, this is just once. This effect can occur once every 5 seconds. So compared to this, which offers basically 400 stamina and magicka every second for 4 seconds, that's 1600 stamina and magicka back for over 4 seconds. And this occurs once every 10 seconds. It's a cooldown of 6 seconds after it procs. You're seeing a lot more regen, you're seeing a lot more sustain than Grundwolf has offered even before the nerf. So definitely I think Kind's win is going to be worth it for this. And the awesome part about this actually is you can backbar it. It doesn't have to be double barred. You can do jewelry and lightning staff, and of course we do want the lightning staff. But before we get to that, again, it's 1 infused on the head, chest, and legs. Every enchantment is healthy. And in terms of jewelry, it's going to be 1 healthy trait and 2 infused traded rings or jewelry pieces. Doesn't matter if it's necklace or ring. The cost reduction of magic abilities will be on a non-infused piece, and the magic recovery plus the reduction of stamina cost abilities will be on the infused pieces. And this is going to help us sustain quite a bit on this build, in terms of not just magic abilities, but also stamina cost abilities like Silver Leash, and even roll dodge is affected by the stam cost reduction enchantment, but not block. So to keep that in mind. But you can backbar this, meaning you can put whatever gives you a major buff. For example, Crit Surge gives you major brutality and sorcery. Thou Procket Boundless Storm gives you major resolve, increasing your physical resistance to spell resistance, Thou Procket, and of course, drinking a potion, Thou Procket. So it's also pretty cool that, if I can show you here, Kind's Wind actually offers not stam recovery to your stam recovery pool, but it actually just gives stam back. So if I proc it right here, and I'm holding block, I'm getting stam back. For those of you who don't know, you don't get stam back while you block. So right now if I'm holding block without the set proc, you can see quite clearly I'm not getting any stamina back. This is pretty significant because we didn't really have other ways to do this. You can be a Dragon Knight tank and do it. You can do Dark Deal and do it, but a lot of people, including myself, don't really like to do Dark Deal all the time. It just feels weird, especially during combat. If at a critical moment and you need to block and you need resources, you can't really Dark Deal. You can roll dodge potentially, but again, that's kind of if you do have to stand to do so. So this set is basically guaranteeing your sustain during both boss and trash fights. So I highly recommend Kind's Wind. And that's pretty much it for the secondary 5-piece set. And note that this not only gives you the magic and stamina recovery, this also gives it to everybody in this area. It's a pretty decently sized area, as you guys just saw. So definitely worth running. Not only are you offering group damage boost, you're also offering group sustain while having some more survivability. At this point, while we can backbar this, it's kind of a waste to just double slot something we can just backbar or proc on one bar. So I tried out Master's Sword and Board. Doesn't have to be perfected. It can be non-perfected, you'll be fine. And the perfected version just gives you 3% more healing taken. But when you deal damage with Puncture, you heal for 6,926 health, basically almost 7,000, and gain that same amount for 5 seconds. This is a very, very strong set right now in both PvE and PvP, so I highly recommend it, especially for this build. So not only are you getting healing from Livewire, and while you're taunting ads or bosses, you're getting healing from this every 5 seconds. Plus, you're getting sustain from this, and if you ever need an emergency shield, all you have to do is Medium Weave or Dark Deal, which gives you even more sustain back anyway. Now, I want to talk about the alternatives because I definitely went through quite a bit looking for alternatives. Notable alternatives in terms of monster sets that you can replace Mother Sienites with is can be Chokethorn. For 4 mana it's okay, but this would require you to heal other people, so you'd have to do Echoing Vigor. I know some people reached out to me saying, oh, well, I don't really like using this. If you're not going to use this, you need a much more reliable self-heal besides like Twilight Matriarch, because Twilight Matriarch, I don't really like it. It's just very unreliable when you yourself need to heal. The heals go to other people in the group, whether it's a 4-man group or a 12-man group. So that's why I'm picking Unstable Clanfear rather than Twilight Matriarch. But if you don't want to use pets in general, Resolving Vigor is pretty much it. But if you're not going to use Resolving Vigor and Echoing Vigor for Chokethorn or something, then expect to have less heals or bursty heals in emergency situations. That's up to you. Engine Guardian is actually pretty busted, and I'll get into this in another video. Grundwolf, again, we talked about it, it's kind of gone. It's gone. It's over. So just forget about it for the Thunderstruck build. Lord Warden Dusk is another alternative. Malabeth, Mighty Shudan, potentially if you don't want to slot Boundless Storm. But that does require you to run either Boundless Storm or Crit Surge, so that's really up to you. Mother Sienna, that's our primary monster set we're using for this build. Stonekeeper, it's still okay, but the sustain nerf was noticeable more on the non-Dragon Knight classes. So that's really up to you. It's still good, but there's other ways like this set for this build. Swarm Mother, it helps pulling in ads, especially if you've aggroed them before the group. Tremor Scale, this can be used in various situations for like stamina groups, if you have stamina DPS in your group solely, but kind of useless for magic DPS groups. Troll King is also another option, but this is sort of like, again, going back to the Chokethorn thing. In terms of the alternatives for 5-piece sets, and we're going to basically be looking at this from the perspective of combining the set with Livewire. Bloodthorn was okay. Draugr's Rest was okay. There was a similar set actually we tested. Where is it? I guess I don't have it right now, but there was a similar set that we tested compared to Draugr's Rest, and that was a bit subpar compared to this one. So this is also potentially an option, but the downside of this is, yeah, it's good, it's great healing, it's off cooldown, but at the same time, and while it can synergize well with the Mother Sienite, at the same time it's like, well, not too many groups need so much overhealing, so that's really up to you. Eye of Navintas is another consideration that I tested out, but it's a little weird, and for pug groups, I don't think it would be a guaranteed proc, and it does require you to slot some sort of synergy, whether that's Liquid Lightning Flood or an Orb, or I mean any other synergy available to you. So that was kind of out of the question, especially when you're talking about a build that you could take anywhere with any one. And for the other 5-piece sets, Necropotence was a natural choice because we are going to slot a pet. Withered Hand, this is also something I considered, but didn't really test out fully. So if you want to try testing this out, I just kind of feel like this is redundant with Livewire. That's really up to you. Way of Martial Knowledge, now this is just something fun I could test. Kind's Kiss. Now, Kind's Kiss is actually a pretty interesting set. The only downside is that you have a 15% chance to heal for X amount and restore 1000 stamina, but you have to be 12 meters or further away from your target. As a tank, this is not viable, or not realistic, to say the least. But that's it for the alternatives that you can try out for the monster sets and the alternative 5P sets. In terms of skills, I'll be explaining the skills here right now. In terms of skills, I would recommend having at least a pull ability like Silver Leash. This is going to be your main stamina drain. And this is where Kind's Wind is going to come in handy. Because while you're pulling things in, you can simply proc it. As you can see, it does help quite a bit. By the time you pull in that many range adds, you have enough stamina left over to block, roll dodge, taunt, or what have you. For the second skill on the bar, we have Pierce Armor. The reason why we have Pierce Armor instead of Ransack, it's personal preference. We don't really have room to slot Ellie Drain, which offers minor magical steal. If you want to try slotting it, we do have 2 flex slots technically, but those 2 flex slots can be used for other things that could be more beneficial depending on the situations, depending on the boss fights or hard modes, or DLC hard modes. So the Kind's Wind is actually going to kick in here again. The extra 399 stamina mag every second will help or alleviate the sustain issue for some magic DPS. So that's why we have Pierce Armor, because if you don't have room for Ellie Drain, you might as well still have a source of Major Breach, because Major Breach affects spell resistance, not physical resistance for your magic DPS. That's why we went with this one. But otherwise, if you want to slot Ellie Drain, you can go with the other morph, which is Ransack, giving minor protection. If you really want the minor protection and you don't want to remorph it, you can just Temporal Guard on the front bar. From the Sigil Order skill line, not required, but while slotted, you gain minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 8%. Pretty powerful buff to have, especially when you combine it with the next skill, Bound Aegis. While slotted, your max magic is increased by 8%, and you gain minor resolve, which stacks with major resolve, by the way. Plus, when you activate it, you increase your block mitigation by 40%. 40% for 3 seconds. This is a really strong skill, used by both endgame sword tanks in PvE and sword players in PvP, depending on the build. I mean, this has seen a lot of use from Cloud Rest to Black Rose, so it's pretty much mandatory if you want to block certain things, like really strong heavy attacks, if you don't have enough stamina to roll dodge, or if you just want to take it to the face. Other than that, this again stacks with your block mitigation, your natural block mitigation, your resistances, your minor protection if you haven't, and of course minor Aegis, and of course other passives like heavy armor. So it's a pretty strong skill. You can actually stack this with immovable if you want to have fun with it. So immovable also, as an alternative skill, grants you immunity, knockback, and disabling effects for 7 seconds. It does snare you by quite a bit, but we're not wearing full heavy, because we do have, as you noticed earlier, 1 medium, 1 light, and 5 heavy, which plays into the Undaunted passive of metal, increasing our max stats by 6%, because we're wearing 1 type of armor each, heavy, medium, 1 light. And we're not going to be snared fully, but at the same time, this increases our block mitigation as well. Increases the amount of damage you block by 5% per heavy armor piece. So that's 25% plus the 40% from Bound Aegis. plus the other passives. And of course, as a positive side, it also procs, because it's a major buff, it procs Kind's Wind as well. So that's something to consider for sure for this build. It's pretty OP. And on both bars, because we need them on both bars, is our little dinosaur friend, the Unstable Clanfear. This is the most reliable class heal besides crit surge that a Sorc tank can have. And I kind of touched upon this earlier with the whole Twilight Torment or Twilight Matriarch thing. And yeah, it's really reliable, and it rarely dies unless it's stuck in the mechanic AoE or wipe AoE mechanic or something. For alternative ultimates, we can again have Temporal Guard, Reviving Barrier, or Greatest Storm Atronach. It's all up to you. Negate, depending on the situation. It's really up to you. On the back bar, this is where it gets interesting. I did mention these two slots are kind of flex slots. Crit Surge is really nice to have because you have a lot of damage going out from yourself in addition to the live wire damage. So you can also get the healing from live wire through Crit Surge, but also Boundless Storm, Blockade of Storms, and whatever you want to do during that pull. So that's pretty good. But again, this is a flex slot with Dark Deal. Again, if you want to use Dark Deal, it does add to the sustain of this build quite a bit. But again, you have like really vital skills like Restraining Prison. This is really nice to have, especially for 4-man content. Not only do you get Major Vitality, which stacks with all these healing taken and healing done, passives and so forth, but it also is a root. It increases your healing received by 30% for 2 seconds, plus 1 extra second per enemy in the area, up to a maximum of 6 enemies. So you could have a duration of 8 seconds for Major Vitality, plus it's an immobilization / root on non-elite trash mobs for 6 seconds. So that gives you time to breathe as a tank. Okay, they're coming, here they are, let's immobilize them. Gives me some time to pull them or taunt them. Also gives your DPS a moment to roll dodge anything that may be immobilized as well. And this is a flex slot, like I said. This could be Dark Deal, this could be whatever that's needed. This could be Empowered Ward even for minor intellect. There's a lot of things you can do. LA Drain is potentially one of them, but for Restraining Prison is just so nice for dungeons. It's kind of hard to replace it. Crit Surge. Again, this was a vital part of the whole Grundwolf thing, plus the crit set from the last build. You can still use it. Again, it's just really nice passive healing, as long as you have your blockade up at the very least. Plus your Clanfear the attacking people does count towards crit surge as well. So that's pretty nice as well. Blockade of Storms, and this is directly tied in with Livewire. When you apply concussion to every enemy in the area or boss, you just put blockade down. You should always pretty much have your blockade down, because I didn't go over this. The infused Crusher enchantment, which we don't have on this staff for some reason, is going to be boosted by the Blockade of Storms, or rather activated by the Blockade of Storms. And that's going to be our standard armor penetration debuff we provide to the group. And that should always be kept up on a boss. And on ads, not really a huge significant thing, but that again ties in with concussion. In terms of the force skill here, this is Boundless Storm. This is our main primary source of major resolve, which is our armor buff. It also gives us major expedition, increasing our movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. It's a nice boost, especially when you're moving through dungeons and trying to catch up with the DPS or get to the next pull as quickly as possible because you don't have time. Yeah, so this is pretty much your main go-to armor buff. Otherwise you can use, like I said, something like Immovable if you'd like, because it offers the same buff, but more block mitigation if need be. And the Horn, this is again dependent, but Horns are generally used by tanks to boost your group's damage, because it does offer not only max stam and max magicka to yourself and your group, which indirectly also boosts group DPS. You and your allies also gain major force, increasing your crit damage by 15% for 10 seconds. So this is pretty great to have. And that's it for the skills. In terms of passes, the main things you want to keep in mind here is like Power Stone. does give us a ultimate cost reduction by 15%. We also do have Expert Summoner, and this is another reason why I like to have a pet active, especially the Clan Fear on the Sword Tank, because we get a free 8% boost to our maximum health. If we didn't have it, our health would look something like this. So it's a bit lower. I don't really like that range, so that's why we take a pet as well. That's another reason why we take a pet. As you guys can see, we're back up to 35-ish K health. Other than that, that's pretty much it for passives and such. You can also see that we have neat passives like Capacitor, 10% innate magic recovery boost. We also do have a cost reduction in Unholy Knowledge, and this is also another reason why I initially picked Breton a while ago, because again, let's go back to the racial passives. Breton does have a 7% magic cost reduction, and that in conjunction with Unholy Knowledge is pretty noticeable. And that's pretty much it. In terms of CP, champion point allocations, we have 81 into Ironclad, 56 Hardy, 56 Elemental Defender, 66 Thick-Skinned, and 11 Heavy Armor Focus. And this can pretty much get you through any dungeon, any arena. 51 Warlord, 16 Bashing Focus into the Tower Tree for green CP, 49 Arcanist, 31 Tenacity, 51 Tumbling, and 72 Shadow Ward. No more than this. 64 Blessed, 56 Upward. This is going to boost our healing done from quite a lot of sources, as I described earlier. 2 Physical Weapon Expert, 20 Master at Arms. It's just usually just for the Riposte passive, and this can also work off of Crit Surge, so that's just a bonus, just free damage plus Crit Surge. And we have 66 Thaumaturge, 52 Precise Strikes, 2 Piercing just for jump points. That's kind of irrelevant, but Thaumaturge, we do have Boundless Storm plus Blockade, or rather Blockade specifically, and Precise Strikes is actually going to affect Vigor if you're going to pick Vigor over a Clan Fear or something. And yeah, and we also do get the access to Last Stand when you fall below 20% health. Should you fall below 20% health, you gain Measure Heroism, granting 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 9 seconds. And this can, depending on your ultimate, maybe it's a barrier or something, this can definitely save your life in a lot of hard mode DLC dungeons. So yeah, definitely recommended. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this build. It took me quite a while. I know some of you have been waiting quite a long time for me to update this, but it took longer than usual because compared to the other builds, some builds just didn't really need too much updating, or if they did, it was like changes in item weights. But due to the nerf, which again was kind of frustrating, we just had to like think of another more creative way, but also more effective way to get that sustain. Plus, we actually managed to work in even more survivability. Thanks for watching so much, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe, have fun, and bye.